Good morning. If everyone could take a seat, that'd be great. My name's Claire Benny. I am an architect. I then went on to be development director at Peabody, and I now advise public sector organisations on how to do better housing, and that's why I'm standing here. We all know this is a really tough point in the housing development cycle. That's not a secret to anyone in this room. Costs are massive, values are coming down, and we've all got second stairs, net zero, you name it. But let's not have a massive whinge fest today if we can. I'd really like to hear from you today if you've got something hopeful or interesting to say, which built environment and political leaders could pick up on and deliver when times are easier. We are going to hear some really hopeful and interesting and optimistic things from our panels. So I'm really looking forward to that being reflected from the audience as well. The NLA, who run LREF, has just published some research I did about London's housing. So before I introduce our eminent speakers, I just thought I'd drop you 10 stats as food for thought, which might inspire some of your questions. So PRS tenants now spend 42% of their income on housing, and 40% of those PRS tenants need to take benefits even though they're in work. Average deposit for a first-time buyer, anybody want to guess? £125,000. Mid-market housing, all that lovely stuff we hear about mid-market rent, shared ownership, still only 1.6% of homes in London, and build-to-rent's only 1%. Housing benefit, 8.4 billion a year in London, compared with only 0.8 billion on grant funding for new affordable homes. Is that right? 1.6% of London households are homeless or in TA, and that includes 80,000 children. 90% of new London homes are flats, not houses, and 1 in 7 of those homes is in a 20-plus storey tower. Maybe that's not going to be the case for much longer. Discuss. A retrofit installation will need to be completed every minute for London stock to be retrofitted by 2050. And it requires a workforce in the tens of thousands, spending around 60 billion. It's nearly there. We've got 3 more to go. 31 million square feet of office space was empty in London in August 22. But how easy is it going to be to convert to housing? Be really interested to hear anyone that's thought about that one. 0.8 billion a year in Section 106 and SIL payments in London. But which citizens really understand what that gets spent on? Could we make that more transparent? And my final stat is that London's 47 opportunity areas have delivered actually just under half of London's new housing in the last 20 years. So the big schemes and the big policies are really quite important. So enough of me and enough of my stats. I've got with me Graham Craig, who's Director and CEO of the new Places for London, which he's just about to introduce to you all. Robin Dobson, who's the Group Property Director from Network Rail. He's been there about 18 months, formerly a director at Hammerson's. We've got Mayor Roxana Fiaz, who's the Mayor of Newham. We've got Joanne Drew, who's the Director of Housing and Regen at Enfield. And we've got Marcus Bate, who's Partnerships, Communities and Sustainability Director at Mount Anvil. What a job. So I'd now like to ask Graham Craig to introduce the new TfL Property Company, which launched today. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Here we go. Places for London. The new name of TfL's Property Company. And it's a name that when we realised that we could do even better than TtL Properties, we thought about what that name could be, and Places for London was the first name we came up with. We obviously then had to consider 200 others before coming back with where we started. Because Places for London describes better than anything what we're here for. We're obviously creating, curating places, not just in London, but for London. And as long as at all times we recognise that we're here to serve the city, then I'm confident that we won't go far wrong. And London needs us. London needs this industry as much as it ever has done. There's a There's a housing crisis, there's a cost of living crisis, there's a climate crisis, and we should do more to help to address those things. And I will very briefly, before we have the wider panel discussion, a chance for you to ask questions, just run through what we're in the midst of at the moment. But I'll also just pause and point out the rather gorgeous Peter Barber scheme with Curapatwa at the London Mews that for me is, well, one of over 50 schemes that we've got, but it's somewhere near the top of the list for me in terms of the quality of architecture and the quality of place, and that's what we need to be having across London. In terms of sites, we are committed to starting on 20,000 homes over London. We've actually already completed 800. We've got 3,350 under construction. We're operating now at the pace that we need to be to hit those 20,000 target. We will be bringing forward for planning something like 8,000 homes over the course of the next 6 months. There will be really not a month that goes by from now on where there's not an announcement about a scheme starting, a scheme getting planning or something under construction. And critically, as you can see, we recognise that if we're seeking to meet London's needs, well, London does not have enough affordable housing, so we are targeting 50% as an average across all of our sites. 3 specific examples, first one of which at Black Horse View, next to Black Horse Road Station. It was a car park. It was a car park used largely by people travelling from well outside the M25 to come into London. It was convenient for them to drive past their local network rail station to come into a tube station and get the tube into London. Is it the best use of the land? No, it's not. If you listen to our planning committees, you might think that what London has is a car parking crisis, given the extent to which people argue that we should retain car parking. You look at that site now and you think, would you get rid of what's there and replace it with a car park? You obviously wouldn't yet. This is an argument we need to continue to have to make every time. But for me, Black Horse View, a great example of what we have done. And the first of what's 3 sites with Barratt London. We're already on site at Wembley Park, 454 homes. We're already on site at Bolo Lane, up to 900 homes. And Barratt is now actually our partner on West London. East London is still available. Anyone wants to chat to me afterwards, we will, in all likelihood, seriously, take forward a partnership for East London as well as West. But certainly for us, Barratt London have been a fantastic partner. Connected Living London up next, so that's build to rent with Granger. 4 sites on site at the moment, 2 of which are in Enfield. That's Southall. Hopefully, Cockfosters. We've now got planning consent through there. We'll hopefully see that one come forward shortly, and that will then take us up to 1,600 homes. And then Edgware. So this is, along with Earl's Court, our large town centre scheme. In the case of Edgware, 3,500 homes and a chance to build a new town centre. As it says there, £1.7 billion investment in local communities, GP surgeries, dentists, libraries, parks. And actually, for us, an important investment is a whole new bus facility in the centre of town, specifically a bus facility with all the infrastructure to support a fully electric bus fleet. So this is step 1 on the decarbonisation of London's bus fleet, funded by development. Now that's great. There are 78 bus garages in London, but for us, one of the opportunities that we've got is how can we across London think about how development can create places that work, creates places for London, but also critically put in place the infrastructure to support what London needs in the future, including, of course, particularly decarbonisation. The other big programme that we've got is with Network Rail. I think Network Rail is probably the only estate of which I am envious in the country. I would happily swap land interests with Robin. I think it's but when you combine the two, it is beyond enormous what we can do across London. Here's a specific picture of Stratford. Stratford for me is just a classic example. 2002, it was the 75th busiest station. It's now the 5th busiest station. We get a lot of talk about how the world has changed since COVID, since the pandemic. The volumes of people using Stratford Station is 92% and rising of what it was. We know that Stratford is a station that you never can quite get to where you want to get to. You're always going through subways or over bridges. Question for us, the Mayor, Robin, myself, is how can we come together? How can we come together and unlock development, providing the homes, including the affordable homes, the workspace? How can we do that and take the proceeds of it and invest it in the infrastructure itself locally? This for me is the model about how grown-ups working together in a number of different organisations can come together and do something that's transformational in multiple town centres across multiple transport hubs. That's what we're here for, and that's part of the reason why I think I have one of the best jobs in London. Last slide from me on building a sustainable future. Greg Clark, who's the chair of our board, said this morning as we launched the company that we're building London's newest grey estate. And that's the mindset that we've got. We are here not for the months or even the years ahead. We're here for the decades ahead. We have to be thinking long term. Doesn't matter what individual politicians may be doing at any one point in time. We've got to be thinking what is the right answer for this city, this country, this planet. So we are committed to net zero by 2030. We're also taking advantage, frankly, of the fact that we know we have literally decades worth of work. So as is shown here, we've supported, trained 1,800 people who are now in long-term employment by giving those people skills on construction. Not just on our sites, but we know that we need vastly more people in construction. So, and because we know that, we can put in the investment up front. And if other parts of the industry can share from that, fantastic. We've also, across 11 schools, engaged 2,200 school kids, introducing them often to real estate, certainly making sure that they understand that we're not just dropping these developments down on different parts of London. For us to get it right, we have to work with local communities. We want to make sure that local people, including, of course, school children, understand what we're doing, have the ability to participate in it. We set up shadow boards, and I think I saw Grace. Grace is someone who's actually come into the organisation having been involved in shadow board at Black Horse View, and that for me is just fantastic, because this is what we need as an industry. It's certainly something that we're committed to. So today, after years of work, we have got to the starting blocks. No further, but we've got a name, we've got a programme, we've got the partners on board. Vastly, vastly more is going to be happening, and I'm hugely excited about all of that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Graham. So I'm now going to ask the panellists some questions before opening up to the floor. Think of some really difficult questions for them, please. Make them really short as well. And I'd love to hear your voices, so use those instead of Slido on this occasion. So it's lovely to hear that Graham and Robin have got engaged. That's really nice. So, Robin, would you like to reflect on the advantages of this land pooling that you're going to be doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's deep and it's wide, but for me, I'm being naughty. I'll steal just the floor just for a minute, because I've spent 20 odd years being a developer in a property business. I had no understanding of what network rail property does, and on this particular agenda, I think it's worth just giving a bit of an insight and showing that I'm not completely mad as to why I joined NR. So last year we knocked out 3,500 homes. That's directly, but also through a lot of forward funds like Granger. In terms of that portfolio, that runs 5 joint ventures. So you know some of them, Ballymore, we've got Ballymore one, we've got Granger one, we've got Solum, we've got Blockwork, etc. In terms of the estate that we just touched on, if you add the numbers up, we run at about 1 billion customers through all those venues. So if you take Liverpool Street Station, you'll have seen the headlines around trying to redevelop that. That has 150 million running through it, 60 million of which use the transport. So actually, those are destinations in their own right. And the combination of what Graham has just said, I'll come on to more detail, but also working with Homes England, Network Rail Property becomes, without question, the largest landowner of, really importantly, brownfield sites around sustainable destinations, not just in Greater London, but across the UK. I had a very interesting discussion with the Crown Estate, where they were working out how much land they own and where we own. The reality is, of course, much prefer to be developing brownfield sites in urban centres, balancing high value with high demand. So I just think, whether we could talk across the UK on many different fronts, and I won't steal that passion. Specifically to the question, I think at the very heart of it is, I think hopefully we've all had probably good and bad experience in network rail property, but also trying to do stuff differently. So in the sort of business I inherited just under 18 months ago, to me, used to talk long term. I honestly do think it used to act very short term. So it used to basically exit projects, exit land as quickly and as fast as possible, which may in certain instances be right. But ultimately, I think the way that certainly Graham and I have sort of engaged ourselves is to say, how do we, as the largest landowners across Greater London, in the sort of sustainable transport locations, how do we enable regeneration, housing being at the forefront of that regeneration? That means that we take more risk, we take balance risk, but also we act as an enabler. So that means in Newham, for instance, we're looking at taking the planning risks on 2 sites there, Bow East, Bow West, but also around Stratford Station. But equally so, I could list 50 other sites where we are joined at the hip at TfL, where we are doing just that. We're almost saying, what is the role that we collectively, and that could be with TfL, but it could be with Newham, it could be with Westminster, or whoever are the other enablers, to actually make sure that stuff gets delivered. That the numbers, you quote 20,000, I quote 20,000 plus an extra 10 in Greater London, which are sites which aren't TfL sites. And then I've got another 20 outside of Greater London. So you can see the scale of opportunity is extraordinary. And I genuinely think, watch this space, because the opportunity to unlock more at pace and at scale is about how we think very differently and we work very differently, thinking long term and enabling and unlocking risk.
I mean, Robin and Graham, we all know that building resi over stations is blooming difficult for technical reasons, for all kinds of other reasons. We've got sort of high-profile, challenging schemes like Euston that everybody will know about. What are you thinking about when you're thinking of how you procure your private sector partners to deliver this stuff with you so that it actually happens?
Do you want to take it?
Go on.
Okay. I suppose Euston is a conference in itself, isn't it? Really, how it should not be set up. I mean, I certainly, first and foremost, also I think we're in a world, whatever the change of politics is in a year's time, is around self-help. So rather than saying, can you fund £500 million worth of infrastructure improvements, this is about how do we do what I just said earlier. Be more proactive, more engaging. Look at unlocking value, as we're doing in Stratford, to then put back into infrastructure and deliver housing and other regenerational mixed-use benefits. In terms of building over stations, well, if you're in Twickenham, we've done just that around Twickenham Station. Not easy, I have to say. I mean, building in and around live railway and over stations, you wouldn't do it by choice. But actually, it can be done and will be done. And we've set up specifically 2 new joint venture vehicles that you may have seen, one of which is called Innova, that actually is a set of expertise and technical know-how to build hard up against rail and over live rail where it needs to be done. But ultimately, there are easier places to build over stations and over rail, but certainly hard up against them can be done. But we've got a lot of land. To me, there's an enormous amount of land that sits alongside rail before you go over the stations.
And on that, and anybody can answer this one, so get ready, the rest of the panel that thought they had 10 minutes more. there's often really understandable pressure to build very tall at station locations, but that can be a massive challenge for locals, especially in the suburbs. How do you deal with the challenge that you know you've got to build tall, it's the right thing to do at station nodes, but you know people struggle with that?
I'll shut up, you two.
Thank you, dear. I think it's difficult. I mean, if you're going to build tall anywhere, you build on transport nodes. It's where people, yes, it's difficult, but it's where people want to live. It's where they want to work. It is the most sustainable place to build. So if you're looking for density, whatever that looks like, building it in, on, around stations, of course, makes sense. From my point of view, we spend a lot of time talking about what are the people's opinions on what's the optimal type of housing or what's not the optimal type of housing. Meanwhile, we are not building enough of any type of housing. There's an element here of we just need to get on with it. I'm also conscious engagement, of course, is important to us. We're going to be doing what we are doing, more development than anyone. We're therefore talking to more communities across London, I think, than anyone. I still don't think that we get it right. We try hard and we'll continue to work to improve that. But one of the elements of it is the people whose voices, I know we all know this, the people whose voices are heard loudest are those people who already have a home. It's the people who don't have a house, those people who are sleeping on someone's sofa. You know, we need to find a way to give a voice to those people who do not have an equal share in this city. If we're taking forward this organisation to deliver what it is that London needs, we have to address head on the fact that we are not building enough homes critically, we're not building enough affordable homes. Absolutely, we have to think about heights, we have to think about local people. We absolutely have to think about the quality of architecture and the quality of design. But I think we should be prepared to confront head on the fact that we need more homes built, and the place to build those homes is around and above transport nodes.
I'd say one comment. Also, of course, building around transport nodes and above and around is expensive. The reality is one of the ways of stepping through viability is through density and through height. So the two are, go hand in hand.
Mayor Fiaz.
A case in point, so the site Stratford, what makes it work effectively is that the principal landowners are all in the private sector. So you've got Network Rail, you've got TfL, and you've got Newham Council. And neighbouring the Stratford Station site, you've also got a 28-acre site, Carpenter's Estate, owned by the council. And talking to the point around navigating debates, really high, gentle, low density, yes, absolutely, framing that within the context of the housing crisis. And by way of illustration, we're currently facing in-year budget forecast overspend £14.8 million against the 365 million revenue budget. Overall, Newham Council's budget is 1.5 billion. We're the 15th largest landowner in the country. We have crushing numbers when it comes to families living in temporary accommodation, nearing 7,000 now. And you talk to the percentage of kids, and it's astounding that at this juncture of the 21st century, 60% of all known homeless households living in temporary accommodation are located in London. But we have, in our budget scenario planning, counted for 30 homeless families presenting each month. It has shot up to 80 in July and August alone. And we need to have the conversations with resident communities, the housing justice campaign sector, about those real hard facts in order to make the case that the density point that's been spoken about, particularly in these transport nodes, is important to cross-subsidise from a public sector perspective, because we're also borrowing huge amounts of money. We've got to pay that back. And we've won the argument on the Carpenter's Estate. We will win the argument on Stratford Station, because the alternative is just unthinkable.
Do you think it's actually local authorities rather than the mayor or others who've got the most agency in kind of having that difficult conversation with communities and making it work? Or do you think the onus for people understanding that density has to happen has to be multi-party?
Let me put it this way, a local authority, if they have their relationship with their resident community right, and I'm certainly under no illusions that there's been a history in Newham where the council didn't get it right, but we've been turning that around since May 2018, where we've placed people at the centre of everything that we do. There's an authenticity that comes with that, because our people can see that we're there as advocates for Newham as a place and as a people, and we'll do good by them. And I think the work certainly that we've done in Newham through housing delivery, we've got some 3,000 housing units, you know, in the pipeline, you know, a grown number of which now have families living in them, is a case in point that will do it regardless. And it's really encouraging to see other colleagues in the public sector family beginning to appropriate that mechanism of public sector-led housing delivery. And one thing I would just want to say on the Places for London that's been announced today, really impressive, really exciting, and perhaps a provocation. As you create places for London, places where communities, people can call home and can thrive, can we also not lose sight of the existing places in London where there is TfL, Network Rail, land and stock that requires additional investment to get it back, you know, at a proper state? Because if I think about some of the existing TfL infrastructure in parts of Newham outside of, you know, the beauty that is the Elizabeth line, and we've got the largest number of Elizabeth line stations in Newham compared to any other London borough. We've got significant station sites that need significant investment. Green Street, you know, Upton Park Station, East Ham Station, and you know, I'm receiving a growing level of concern on part of resident communities. When is the investment going to come here?
Great, thanks. Marcus, I think you wanted to come in on the density issue, or?
Yeah, the scenario building high density, tall buildings close to a station is one that Mount Anvil is pretty familiar with. We have 3 live schemes within a stone's throw of Elizabeth line stations. And there were 2 lessons learned I was keen to share. One linked, Graham, to what you were saying. So we get so many objections from people who live in very nice houses quite close to stations. And a few years ago, our strategy was to try and meet them, greet them, understand them. And we've decided it's better to spend your time with different people, with the people who actually benefit from the housing that you're promoting, and get different voices into the equation, particularly those who are going to live on the estates that you're transforming. So that's the first one. And thanks Graham, for mentioning it, which I think is a really important one. The second is a station doesn't mean that isn't a neighbourhood on its own. And I certainly underestimated the responsibility that I think developers as well as public sector have to contribute to the economic expansion around stations, rather than say, here's a big station, let's have a load of housing.
I'm just going to get Joanne and Marcus to talk a bit about sort of being, working in public and private partnerships. So Joanne, obviously Meridian Water is about to deliver its first homes. In fact, I think you've got residents now, which is fantastic. Yeah. But obviously the project's been through a few economic and political cycles. How have you as the local authority had to adapt over time, and what do you look for when you're looking for delivery partners?
Okay, that's a really good question. Obviously, Enfield is very well known for our landmark Meridian Water site, which is a 10,000 homes, 6,000 new job opportunity, which is going to transform the Edmonton area in the south of the borough and more broadly the whole of the borough. So it is a really important growth area for London. It's also a really important opportunity for partners to work with us to deliver that. Having spent the last 6-7 years in terms of being a master developer, bringing forward additional public sector investment for infrastructure, having the vision and the political will and drive to bring this scheme through to a position where we've actually got homes on site and we've got future phases ready for development partners to deliver. It's a really great opportunity for equipped and equally visionary development partners to work with us on some exciting new phases that we'll be bringing forward. But as well as Meridian, Enfield has got a lot going on in the borough that I wanted to talk about and then put into context the sorts of partners that we want to work with. Just like Newham, we've got incredibly challenging homelessness issues in the borough. So at the moment we have 300 people living in hotel accommodation in addition to our core temporary accommodation stock. So that's costing us around £750,000 every month, and that's led us to this year a £20 million budget pressure on a £265 million revenue budget. So a material deviation. So we have got a 3,500 council homes development programme in delivery, which includes some regeneration schemes. Our major one is in Joyce and Snell's in Edmonton, so that's 2,000 homes that we are about to get on site with in the next 6 months or so, where there are future phases for development and delivery. We've also are looking for accommodation and we will support developers who bring forward sites interested in build to rent for low income households, interested in supporting more social housing, so very much interested in enabling private development in the borough to meet our acute housing needs. We think we have a really important role in strategic enabling in the borough. So that's helping landowners to bring forward schemes, that's helping to unlock stalled sites, it's working with the health sector to bring forward surplus land and assets for partnership use. So really important strategic enabling role. As a local authority as well, we've got £1 billion worth of property and land assets, which we really want to sweat and make good use of in this current economic climate. So we have been releasing opportunities to the market, which involves office buildings that have got a future potential life, which also includes land and industrial sites, a range of opportunities in the borough, which in partnership we hope to create some really interesting placemaking opportunities from. In addition to that, we are really keen to ensure that we are bringing forward investment opportunities. So we're looking at how we can raise additional forms of capital in partnership with partners. So I think all of those opportunities in the borough present some really interesting new opportunities for partners to come and work with us. And I've got kind of 5 features of what we look for in a good partnership arrangement. So
1 second.
I'll let you take a shot of my notes. So the first one, now development and regeneration is a top political and corporate priority for us in the borough. So we want partners that will make Enfield one of their top priorities as an organisation. Absolutely critical that we're on the same page in terms of how important our partnership and delivery is to us. Now, we are all working in very challenging financial situations where all of our business models are having to be adapted to respond. Local authorities are in extremely challenging financial circumstances at the moment. So we're looking for partners that can understand and be financially resilient to the economic changes that we are likely to continue to experience, so that we don't have stop-start situations. We have continuous delivery that we can then deliver good outcomes for our residents. The other issue, and I'm going to talk about the secondary staircase issue, but pragmatism and adaptability. I think we've been down the secondary staircase route twice now, and I think the second time round everyone got their heads around it a bit more quickly and just said, right, we've got to get on, we've got to redesign. You know, there quite a lot of whinging around, well, we don't know what to design and how, and there's going to be increased costs. But what we're looking for in development partners is quickly responding to those kind of changes in the regulatory landscape, if you like, so that we can be on the front foot with keeping our schemes going. The other thing I'd say in terms of skills of development partners, in the context of the need to decarbonise our existing housing stock, as well as develop new low carbon developments, we're really looking for partners that can get engaged in the refurbishment sector as well. So if we're doing a new development or regeneration scheme, how through the bringing forward of infrastructure like heat networks, renewable power, etc., how through those infrastructure elements that are on new developments, how can they be brought to bear for surrounding neighbourhoods, and how can we use the capacity of development and regeneration to create a catalyst to decarbonise wider areas. And perhaps that's an area of social value return that developers might want to think about when they're bidding and wanting to work with us for schemes. So how can we add more benefits from development for existing housing stock?
Joanne, I'm just going to kind of get Mayor Fiaz to reflect on some of that, and you've got Beckton coming forward. I think you've already delivered loads of great new housing alongside the GLA and Canning Town Royal Docks. You know, what was the key to making those happen with your partners, and how are you going to deliver Beckton, and what are you looking for in future partners there?
Okay, so in quick or rapid succession, a committed, ambitious, intentional local authority with a directional political leadership. We need housing. We're going to get it done. And we've got a really clear framework through which we will be looking at delivering housing, and that's through the inclusive growth, community wealth building lens, because it has to deliver for our people, not just in simple numerical housing unit terms, but also how it will impact on the quality of life. Solid, deepening relationships with key partners, including the GLA. And the Beckton Riverside site that you've referred to is part of a significant OAPF, and we've been working on that over the last 4 years with the GLA and colleagues over at the Royal Borough of Greenwich, and the commitment of the private developers in the Newham case, it being Barclays, very much buying into the vision that we have for the borough and excited by that, and being open to challenge around the points of negotiation. But you know, I've been really heartened by the speed at which you know, they've adapted to the inclusive growth frame that we've asserted and applied. And in that instance, you know, it being coupled with a really important transport infrastructure piece with the DLR. So the work with TfL has been really, really key. We're waiting for the application to be submitted. Will be anything within the range of 10 to 15,000 homes. Obviously, we've got the local plan that's currently under review. And again, that local plan, which went out at Regulation 18 stage for consultation, and we're just going through the consultation responses, again, anchored by our inclusive growth, community wealth building, you know, response to climate emergency. Because for me, it's important that, one, we future-proof Newham, and future-proofing is, you know, is the full spectrum of climate emergency impact, not just the physical impact, but the human impact. and we've placed a premium on the health, well-being and happiness of our residents in Newham, and that's and that's what we need to mobilise everyone around. If we are making and creating places which don't lend themselves to addressing issues of health inequity and the physical human impact of climate emergency, then we will have failed in our future-proofing endeavours.
Great. And Marcus, I'm going to get you to think from your sort of private sector perspective. Mount Ambler's focused on regen schemes on local authority land. What's the ideal procurement process from your perspective, and what should councils avoid doing when they're finding the right partner?
The ideal process is one where you get given the answers before you do the procurement. So thank you, Roxana and John, for our next procurement in Newham and Enfield. We used to shy away from procurement. Graham would rightly berate us, because until 3 years ago, we would look for good off-market opportunities where a landowner, a housing association, or local authority said Mount Amble was the right partner for us. And as we reorientated our investment strategy, we realised that the sites that local authorities own are too good to miss out on, and you need to roll your sleeves up and compete. We've bid on 6 schemes in 3 years. It's not many. We lost the first. I'm very competitive, so I really didn't like that. But losing is really helpful. We learned we need to build our resident capability, capacity, which makes a big difference on estate regeneration schemes that we work on. And since then, we've been selected in Islington and Tower Hamlets, in Kensington, Chelsea, and Hammersmith and Fulham, so 4 in a row. And we find out on the next one afterwards. So ideal process, I'll give you 2 different frames of it, like a slightly facetious one, and then lessons learned on what I think doesn't go so well. Remembering the Mount Amble only bids on 2 procurement jobs per year. So an ideal process, tip 1, which I'll give to you, Joanne, please make the process really time consuming.
Okay, we can do
Not
that.
so complicated that only a business that bids on 1 or 2 things a year can do it.
Okay, that's guaranteed.
Second ideal tip, Roxana, for you would be, please make sure that residents are really heavily engaged in the selection process, so that only businesses who spend all their time with residents on estate regeneration schemes can win.
Challenge back.
Yeah.
Appreciate the sentiment,
Yeah.
but it could create an unintended monopoly, and you could be purchasing through your consumer approach. A preference, a bias.
Yeah, well, I'll slightly change the order, because one of the things that I think is flawed in procurement around resident engagement is the right level of involvement and the landowner's confidence to involve them the right way. We really like it, but we do experience it as a popularity competition. Do you like the business owners? Do you like what they're about? We don't normally get asked much about the project. So I think I'll come back to a few other lessons. I'm not completely convinced about it.
Again, sorry, I just can't let that pass. I mean, I've got my Director of Community Wealth Building who leads on all of our place and people regeneration. And what you've described is very alien to me. I don't recognise that in the context of our approach to procurement and who we choose as development partners across our schemes. It's just, but he's there and you can speak to him afterwards.
Yeah. Newham wasn't in my list of the 6 that we bid on.
No, you were very pointed in kind of directing that advice to me, so I just thought I'd push back.
But isn't the fundamental point, isn't also the fundamental point actually someone taking ownership of procurement?
Yeah.
You know, rather than, and we have it, historically with NR, where you've gone to procurement and it's a standard default is go to lawyers.
Yeah. No, I totally get
and
that.
you sort of, sorry, I'm not
I'm
not going to go at anyone, I'm just NR. If you're going to run procurement, run it well, run it as quickly as you can, run it fairly, but also take ownership of it. You know, rather than put it out there and it's run by third parties and lawyers and consultants, you're out there to make the decision yourself.
And you're absolutely right, and that's a fair point. And actually, the experience that I've had of Newham as the Mayor of Newham, where I'm the portfolio lead for inclusive growth and strategic housing delivery, is precisely ensuring that internally all the different parts of the council are on the same page and viewing this through the same lens, and it's a one council approach as opposed to siloed council departments. So that's a fair comment.
And it's not a political approach, it's a point and get it done.
It's an efficient approach.
I take Robin, just the point on run it as quickly as you can, because that goes to the slightly jokey thing about how complicated. One of the things that we've experienced on the 4 that we've been selected on is the processes from when we start looking at something to when it formally comes out to when we're selected and then we meet residents, year and a half, 2 years. And the feedback we then get when we meet community members, we always try and get on site really, really quickly, is why are you so slow? And like, we only got appointed last week.
Well, we've just been doing York Central, we've been going at it for 12 months. There you go. So that is 2.5 million square feet of commercial, that's 2,500 homes. Part of that is because York is difficult to get planning. It's a difficult county to get stuff done in. But you know, a year.
Yeah, and it's not an ideal process if the community who are going to benefit from the scheme that's being procured feel exhausted, bored and frustrated on the first day of the development partner joining the project. Yeah.
And I think there's something really valuable there around the approach from the outset on part of the local authority concerned, and we certainly instilled or embedded it into our approach with carpenters. How do you take a resident community within the immediate geography of focus, but also surrounding areas and the neighbourhood, and enhance their literacy around housing development and everything associated with a scheme on a 28-acre site that's going to be completed in phases over a 15-year time frame? That allows you from the outset to manage expectations, to get them more intimately involved in the technicalities and practicalities, as opposed to what I see ordinarily happening elsewhere, which is, don't worry, we're going to deliver big headlines coming out of a council, and then there's silence. And I'm not saying that we've got it right or perfect, but that's certainly a philosophy that I would promote.
Right, we've got about 13 minutes for questions, and I really want to max those out. Sorry, this is a bit later than I hoped. Please, somebody ask a short, difficult question. Dieter.
Hi, Dieter from RCKA. It's mainly for Craig, Robin, to pick it up on a UK scale. You're uniquely pan-London and public-facing, public-serving facing. So I'm wondering in this discussion whether you could connect any of the dots about providing some sort of wider social impact initiative that maybe raises the awareness of the need of local communities, that you could do something in your broader remit to promote that need and that other local authorities could use. I don't disconnect the need for local authorities to know their local communities as well, but I'm just wondering if there's any initiatives or any thoughts that you're having about contributing to that.
Do you mean promoting the need for new housing at all?
Exactly, the need for new housing, and the other side of the discussion, or maybe something else about social impact, that you have an opportunity as a pan-London organisation rather than 33 individual.
Yeah, well, sorry, you go first. You go. It's a marriage. Come on.
It's going well.
And I'll correct you later.
Yeah, okay. I think we've tried and had successes looking at considering these things site by site. What is it that local areas need? How can we work with particularly the local authority in order to address those local needs? But I completely get the point that actually it's not getting any easier to get anything done, and actually just understanding how we might stand back and set out on a pan-London basis or even a national basis in the case of Robin, what is this need? I'm keen that we're not doing that by ourselves. I think actually the industry as a whole does nothing like enough in order to talk with one voice about the value that it brings, the necessity of what we're doing. And I think actually for Robin and I, probably the single most important role we've got is to convene. There's a hell of a lot that we can do by ourselves, but if we can bring local authorities, public sector land, the industry together, and just say, if you look at the scale of the opportunity here, you do not get there by considering these things project by project or even borough by borough. We have to start to think about how we get our heads around the opportunity, but also what it takes in order to unlock things on that sort of scale. And I think, without doubt, you know, the biggest challenge that we have is how do we take the population with us? And I completely agree. You don't get there simply by looking at things on a site-by-site basis. So I'm very sure that we don't want to be trying to do this by ourselves, but I think on the back of the programme that we've got, actually understanding how we then leverage the industry as a whole feels to me to be something that's definitely worth exploring.
I would just add super quick. I think hopefully what we are now doing in rural property is taking a long-term approach, hence the discussion we're all just sharing. Because I do generally think that we were talking long-term and actually doing very short-term. And if you're selling out, who cares really, because somebody else is going to deliver it. Whereas I think now we are lock stock in delivering it, forming joint ventures, partnering up both public to public and also, importantly, public to private. So I think we are network rail property with TfL, with local authorities, with all the other, you know, outside London, the LEPs, the etc. we work with. You know, I think we can really open doors. I think you can really set a community agenda, just like we could have a discussion on Bow East, Bow West there, where we're saying rather than doing it the other way, what we used to do is basically sort of, pre my time, actually come up with a scheme and then go off and then sell the scheme. What we're actually doing is saying, let's look at it from a community perspective, just like you do as a private sector developer. What meanwhile usage do you put in? How do you get involvement? How do you get ownership from local communities? What's missing? And then build that up in almost from the ground up. So I think it's a very different approach.
Can I take the question here, please?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kat Hannah from Avison Young. I guess it's a question probably more again to Graham and Robin about, I guess, the people at the sidelines of the marriage, which is actually the operational partners that you've got in TfL and Network Rail. Yeah, I saw Robin's reaction there, because obviously there's a lot of pros to having a separate arm, but actually when it comes to keeping costs down, thinking about station specification, identifying further land for development, a good relationship with operations is important. How's that been going?
100%. I mean, I know nothing about rail. It's a good start. I'm a property person through and through, which actually I think is probably a good thing, because, you know, I don't get kind of broad in that. I mean, the reality is there's no money. So, you know, the rail industry is starved of money for the next 10 years. We'll hear the headlines. So if we want to fix Liverpool Street Station, yes, we've got, you know, you've seen all the headlines around heritage groups, you know, we need to be sensitive around it. But the reality is, if there's a £500 million worth of infrastructure investment needs to go to Liverpool Street, and I could equally say, together we're working on Victoria Street station plans, we're working on Waterloo. We'll eventually get back to Euston when it grounds itself out eventually. But that's self-help. So to me, what we have had is incredibly positive input, and I suspect that's been part because the nature of funding has changed. The reality is, if you want infrastructure funding, you've got to find a way to unlock regen. That could be housing, it could be all the other pieces, to get funding back into the infrastructure. It's not going to happen through the public purse anymore. So that's playing to our advantage, but not easy.
I've got some enthusiastic people at the front. Is there anyone in the middle or the back want to ask something? Right, I've got a question in the middle there.
Hi, I'm Natasha Vose. I work for React News. I was wondering if I can ask a boring debt-related question. How you've adapted your schemes to the high interest rates we're seeing at the moment?
Who wants to take that? How are you dealing with the cost of debt finance?
I can start. So from a local authority perspective, obviously we work in a commercial way with our development schemes, as you will as developers, but we take lower margins because of the social value that we're creating and the council tax take, etc. So I have to say that our schemes aren't now meeting hurdle rates with the new costs of debt, despite the fact that government gave us a reduction on the PWLB rate for a couple of years. So we are lobbying quite strongly, government, in terms of the forthcoming autumn statement, to provide PWLB debt at a lower rate for social housing and regeneration schemes, and perhaps in the same way that housing associations borrow, predicated to schemes specifically and with debt rates tied to the schemes over their life. So we have certainty. We may lose, we may gain over a period of time, but at least we have certainty. So we're thinking strategically about how we work with government to bring more affordable debt to underwrite our housing supply.
So you definitely win the boring question prize, but surprisingly...
I like the question, I like the question.
We all want to answer it.
Everybody wants to answer it. So I'm going to start with Graham first.
We take no funding from TfL now, so we're financially separate from TfL. We pay a dividend on the profit that we make, but we are no longer in competition with Transport for funding. We have to fund everything ourselves. Now, we are clear that we want to develop through the cycle. This is, again, emphasising the point, it's about the long term. It's what it is that London needs. London doesn't need yet another developer who times development just to where you maximise profit. But of course, we've got to be very, very aware that as an organisation that TfL is not financially standing behind. We have to stand on our own feet at all times. None of us wants to go down the route of what has happened elsewhere. With authority. So there is extraordinary rigour in place at all times to make sure that we can both accept lower returns because it's the right thing, because we want to deliver through the cycle, but at the same time we are never putting any risk whatsoever into the organisation.
Can I go to Marcus and then Mayor Fiaz, please?
Well, yeah, thanks. The high interest rates suck when you've got all of the costs that we talked about and regulatory change, which really challenging. Two things I think interesting to me, at least, because it's not a boring question at all. Thank you. One is people may or may not know that it's a highly competitive market for development finance, as in it's good to be borrowing. When times are risky, lenders are more cautious. And we are getting approached by more repeat lenders saying, please, can we lend to you again? Because you repaid last time. On time, we want to put out debt. There are less projects to fund. So we're really pleased. We will announce a development funding facility next week on a new project where we had two very reputable high street banks at each other's throats to give us their money. It's expensive money, but it's great that it's so competitive. The other one is from a corporate finance point of view, we think it's a really good time to be extending your ability to fund, even if in the short term it's expensive. And I see my friends Prashant and Dan from the GLA, our corporate funding in Mount Anvil comes from the GLA. We would love to turn that into something that runs into the mid-2030s and maybe borrow less in the short term.
So Mayor Fiaz and then Robin, and then we're going to have to stop fairly soon afterwards.
Okay, that as in Enfield, but also we're beginning to work up some, and talking to Graham's point about, avoiding some of the disastrous approaches that have been pursued by local authorities with levels of debt and overstretch, where even more so as local authorities under the spotlight by HM Treasury. I think it's extraordinary that DLUC has had to return some nearly £1 billion or thereabouts to HM Treasury that was allocated for housing delivery. We're working through some potential, well, two things, a loan model and an equity model that we're having conversations with government on at the moment, in addition to borrowing or drawing down from the Public Works Loan Board, which presently, as a consequence of inflation, is becoming quite difficult, whether or not we can get loans at 4.5% to help. That's what we're scoping out at the moment.
Just on land as a developer, it's great, isn't it? As Network Rail, we own all the land. So you spend decades in a private developer trying to parcel land and assemble land. So if you've got land, you can do things with it. You can sell it down, you can trade it on. So I would class there are 3 or 4 schemes where, again, changing the role that we now act on, coming side by side on where we were selling land, historic deals done before I arrived, we're now not selling in, we're putting our land in, taking a long view, and of course, no surprise, everyone's quite pleased because their IRR's gone through the roof. So, you know, you've suddenly primed schemes that weren't previously happening because people had to put land up front and selling land out. That's us taking a different role and using our land effectively.
Fantastic. Back to long-term thinking on land. What I've heard today, well, the two things that have stuck with me are that local authorities, it would be just great if they really gripped and steered procurement really hard and with vision and didn't make it too complicated. And I'm also massively looking forward to seeing the fruits of the relationship next to me. Could you please thank our speakers very much?
Well done. Very good.